everyone, welcome back to Dakota's Music World. I'm Dakota Gordon, and today I'm joined by the legendary artist behind timeless hits like Mony Mony, I Think We're Alone Now, Crimson and Clover, and countless others, Tommy James. With over 100 million records sold, 23 gold singles, 9 platinum albums, and 32 Billboard Hot 100 hits, Tommy is truly one of the defining artists of the 1960s and beyond. Tommy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, my pleasure. Believe me. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I have to say, before the interview, I had the chance to read your book, Me, the Mob, and the Music.
Right.
I have it right here, and
That's the one.
I have to say, it's an amazing read. I read it in about 2 days. I couldn't put it down. It's just such an interesting story, and
Thanks.
yeah, and what initially stood out to me was just how you talked about your parents recognizing your musical talent from a really young age. You wrote that your mother actually had to turn up the radio to quiet you down as an infant, I believe.
That's
Throughout the
right.
book, you then describe going into just music being something you enjoyed to something you truly felt deeply connected to. Looking back now, how do you think music evolved from just an interest into something that became a major part of who you were as a person?
Well, I think it was bound to happen because music was always such a big part of my life. And when I was 4 years old, my grandfather bought me a ukulele for my birthday, and I started playing it. I tuned it properly. I played songs on the radio. I started singing with it, and by the time I was 6, I was playing and singing all kinds of stuff. When I was 9 years old, um, I got my first guitar. My folks bought me an acoustic guitar, and I threw the ukulele was out the window, and I was a guitar player, and I taught myself how to play, and basically started singing and buying records. And of course, it was all rock and roll was just starting out. This was when I was 9 years old. It was 1956. And when I was 10, I got my first electric guitar. And again, started playing everything I could on the radio and buying records and playing the records and playing to the records. And I started my first band when I was 12. And, we started playing around town. That played my first gig for money when I was 13. And I've had the same job since I was like 13 years old. So, I mean, it's really amazing. It's all I ever wanted to do. And it's a good thing the good Lord let me do it because I don't know what else I would have done.
Yeah, and you talked about starting to form your bands, and in 1962 you got to record a record with your band Tom and the Tornadoes. You recorded
Right.
your song Judy,
Uh-huh.
and this was really your first experience, I believe, recording and releasing music with a band,
That's right.
especially. And
That's right.
even though this was just a local release, but do you remember what you felt when you first heard your own music played on vinyl in public?
It was a very surreal experience. And all I can say is that from the time I was 14, I've been making records. And it was just the first time hearing myself on the radio when I was 14. It was really unbelievable. And of course, I was going to high school then. And it was nobody else in my school was doing anything like that. So it was very cool. I also had a job in a record shop after school and on the weekends, so I could promote my band out of the record store and learn retail, the retail end of the music business, learn all the trade papers and the labels and the songwriters and the publishers and the artists and everything. And so it was like going to college for me. And when I was 16, we were asked by a local disc jockey who was starting up a new label called Snap Records if we would come and record for his label. And I said, hell yes. You know, it's not like I'm doing anything else. So we recorded 4 songs for him, and one of them became my first hit record. It was Hanky Panky. And that was released locally, and in Indiana and Michigan. We had no national distribution, but this is in my hometown of Niles, Michigan, by the way, that we recorded Hanky Panky. And so the record kind of came and went. And in '65, I graduated from high school, and I took my band on the road, and we played clubs, up through the Midwest. And in May, 60 years ago, this month, in May of '66, right in the middle of my 2 weeks playing this club, the guy went belly up for not paying his taxes. The IRS shut him down, and we got sent home back to Niles, Michigan, feeling like real losers. But that's how the good Lord works, because the minute I got home, I got the call that changed my life. And it was a local disc jockey in Pittsburgh and a local distributors, informing me that my record of Hanky Panky was sitting at #1 in the city of Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Unbelievable. And I couldn't believe it. And only in America. And so would I come to Pittsburgh and do some shows and do some TV and so forth. So I did. I came to Pittsburgh, picked up a manager and a new group because I couldn't put the original group back together. And a week later, we're in New York City selling the master of Hanky Panky. And we got a yes from Atlantic. We got a yes from Columbia, a yes from RCA. And the last place we took the record to was a little company called Roulette Records. And I went to bed that night feeling so great that we were probably going to be with one of the big corporate labels. And then about 10 o'clock the next day, we started getting calls from all these other record companies that had said yes before, and suddenly are saying, listen, Tom, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to pass. What do you mean you got to pass? I thought we had a deal. And Jerry Wexler up at Atlantic Records told me the truth, that Morris Levy, the head of Roulette Records, who was known for being, shall we say, a mobbed up label, had called all the other record companies and scared the hell out of them, backed them down. And we were apparently going to be on Roulette Records. He called him up and he said, "This is my freaking record. Back off." And that's just how he talked, right out of the movies. And so it was the first offer I couldn't refuse. And we apparently were going to be on Roulette Records. And that's what the book is about. My crazy and notorious relationship with Roulette Records. And because unbeknownst to us, Roulette Records, in addition to being a functioning record company, and a pretty good one, they'd had a lot of hits, was also a front for the Genovese crime family in New York. So that made life real interesting for us. Sorry to be so long-winded, but that's how it all happened.
Was that when you realized how powerful Morris Levy was within the music industry, or was that not until after you got signed that you actually realized?
Well, right about the same time, because we signed right away, and of course, we learned incrementally. Like one step at a time, what Morris Levy and Roulette really was. So, but meanwhile, they took Hanky Panky to #1 all over the world, not just in the United States. It was really an amazing story because I can tell you, if we had gone with one of the other labels, one of the big labels, we would have immediately been turned over to an in-house A&R guy, a producer, and that's probably the last you would have ever heard of us. We would have been lucky to have been a one-hit wonder. And at Roulette, they actually needed us. And I also got to run my own career musically. Got to put my own production crew together, and was left alone because even though they sold hits, they couldn't make them. So that was a great irony. Getting paid, of course, was
Yeah.
another story altogether. But yeah, so that's how all that happened, how it began.
And I think the other thing that you wrote about that's so interesting about that story is you were at the point where you were starting to explore other options for work before that record became a hit.
That's right. Well, I was before the record exploded out of Pittsburgh. Um, I was married and we had a baby, and I had to find a job. I mean, because you probably couldn't support a family playing dances on Friday nights and stuff. So I was on my way to find work, and I got there. I just couldn't do it. I could not give up music, and I ended up going back home. And that is the beginning of where it all happened. And I'm so glad I didn't take any other job. It all worked out pretty well.
No, it definitely worked out pretty well because once you signed with Roulette, Hanky Panky went to number one, as you said. But not only that, it beat out Strangers in the Night by Frank Sinatra and Paperback
Yeah.
Writer by the Beatles. I mean,
Yeah.
you're beating two of the biggest names in the music industry for the best record of that week.
Well, I was very, very lucky. Yeah, I was blessed right from the beginning. True, that is a true story. That I was so very fortunate. And here's Roulette, and all the shenanigans going on there. But meanwhile, at a creative level, I don't think I could have done any better. Because, as I say, they left me alone and allowed me to be the master of my own fate. So I just was so lucky to had good people around me and put a team together that could write and produce. And then I was sort of an on-the-job trainee. I learned the record business. I had already learned the retail end of it. Now I was learning the creative end of it. So yeah, it all happened really fast. And of course, we did about 110 million records on Roulette,
Mm-hmm.
all in the 8 years
Mm-hmm.
that I was with Roulette.
Yeah, and that's another thing I noticed throughout your book what you talk about. You were always interested in speaking with the people who were doing the other parts of the music.
Right.
You were always speaking to the managers, to the promoters. You
And
weren't only interested in the music.
right. I talked with the distributors,
Mm-hmm.
the promotion guys. I really learned the record business at a street level. And I was always curious about, how the whole machine worked. It really is quite amazing too, because this business was basically back then run by street guys. These were not college educated people, and there was no course in college to teach you how to do this. But yet this record business was such a well-oiled machine and worked with such precision. And it was, so I wanted to find out everything I could about what went into making hit records.
Mm-hmm.
That really is the truth.
I mean, it has worked. It has worked for you, as we'll get into later. Another thing that was really interesting to me is that the apartment building that you were living in New York at the time, there were a lot of other really cool people who ended up becoming famous themselves there. But one of them that was really interesting was the person who took your cover photo for the second album, It's Only Love, was Linda Eastman, who
Yeah.
turned into Linda McCartney.
Right.
Looking back, what was it like working with her before anybody had any idea who she was or was going to be?
Well, she was good. I mean, she was so talented. She had shot a lot of bands on the street. She had taken pictures of them as they were in and out of buildings and so forth. But we gave her a shot at being her first studio photos.
Mm-hmm.
And she was incredible. I mean, she great imagination, and she took great shots. And she was our photographer for about a year and a half. And of course, once Paul came along, that was it. She was gone. So, but anyway, she was just incredibly talented. And we took several album shots together, album covers and single jackets and, publicity shots. And she was great.
Yeah, and then another thing that happened around that time in your career, one of your later albums was Mony Mony, which became one of your bigger records of your career, reaching the top of the charts even in the UK, which was a really big deal at the time to have a chart topper in the UK from a US artist, especially with the British invasion going on and everything like that.
That's right.
But what I found fascinating is that the iconic title Mony Mony was actually one of the last pieces of the song to come together. Can you kind of tell me how Mony Mony came about?
Sure. Well, we had gone into the studio trying to create sort of a throwback rock records, party rock, a Louie Louie, records from the early 60s that I always loved. Mitch Ryder stuff, that kind of stuff. And so we were in the studio playing with different chord progressions and just different grooves. And we came on just a solid rock groove and just kind of wrote a song around it. And, we glued the track together and we liked it. It took us several weeks. And we then wrote the song, and Richie Cordell and myself, and Bobby Bloom, by the way, who had a record called Montego Bay at the time, wrote the "Ooh, I Love You, Mony, Mo, Mo, Mo." He wrote the middle part, and so, but we had no title. And it's the night before I'm supposed to go in and do the lead vocal, and we still have no working title. We're looking for a 2-syllable girl's name, kind of a silly something, kind of a Sloopy or Boney Maroney or something like that. And so Richie and I, we throw our guitars down, we walk out on my terrace. We're in Midtown Manhattan, light up a cigarette, and it's night, and the first thing our eyes fall on is the Mutual of New York insurance company sign, with MONY and the $sign in the middle of the O, and it gave you the time and the temperature, and we just started laughing because that was the perfect name, Mony. I couldn't believe it. And we both started, it was like God gave us the title, I've often said if we'd have been looking in the other direction, that sucker might have been called Hotel Taft. I was desperate, maybe Equitable, Pan Am, maybe. So at any rate, that's how the title came about, and it actually became the record the next night. And when we recorded it the next night, people off the street were coming in the studio and singing and screaming, and so we wanted it to sound like a party. And so we just secretaries from the building upstairs. We were in the bottom of the 1650 building, which is where the studio was, and it's all filled with managers and publishers and everything. And so as they would get off work, we'd bring people downstairs to hand clap and scream. And it really was a party that got captured on tape. That's really what Mony was.
And that's what it sounds like. I mean, when you listen to it now, it sounds like a live song being recorded in the studio.
Yeah, there's probably 50 people in the studio when we made that record.
I'm surprised you could even fit 50 people in there.
Yeah, well, we got them in, and we just said, come on, everybody, go nuts, and they did.
And then after that album was released, you guys had massive success and were even planning a tour overseas, but you ended up stepping away from that to support Hubert Humphrey during his presidential campaign.
Right.
looking back now, why did you feel like it was important to use your platform in this way? Because this was back before artists weren't doing that back then like they are today.
That's right. Um, well, his campaign, his secretary to be exact, called Roulette Records and asked if we would, she talked to my manager and asked if we would consider coming out on the road with Hubert Humphrey. And he wanted to involve young people to this presidential campaign. And he asked if we would come out and do that after the convention. And we said, yeah, it would be great. That no rock act had ever hooked up with a politician before to do such a thing. And this was presidential politics. So we said, yeah, we'll do it. And so we were watching the convention, the Democratic convention that year. We were supposed to meet him the following Wednesday in, I think it was Wheeling, West Virginia. And all of a sudden, that's the night all the kids got beat up by the Chicago cops. It was a whole bloody scene. And the whole convention went nuts. And it was, the cops came right into the convention, and the kids got beat up over the head and arrested. And so we said, what the hell have we got ourselves into? Oh my God, what is that? So anyway, we hooked up with him the following Wednesday, and he couldn't have been nicer. It was we did the whole campaign with him. He asked me if I would be president's advisor on youth affairs. And he said it was sort of a sub-cabinet thing. And I said to him something smart like, believe me, the youth are having affairs and I'm just the boy to look into it, And so anyway, that's how it was between us, It was like almost comical. But he was a good man, and we could have done a lot worse than Hubert Humphrey. And he lost by this much. And it was, we were with him the night of the election at the Leamington Hotel in Minneapolis. And we were on 3 TV networks at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Playing Mony Mony and Do Something to Me on 3 networks at once. So it was really an amazing experience. He ended up doing the liner notes for the Crimson and Clover album.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
So you guys were made friends after that, right?
Oh, yeah. Right up until he died. Yep, absolutely. And it's amazing.
And yeah, going on with that Crimson and Clover that you mentioned, this was interesting when you guys got back from touring with him. The whole industry had basically changed at that point. It went from selling singles to selling albums. And
right.
You have the Beatles releasing all these concept albums. You have all the other bands at the time doing the same thing. You guys realized you had to release a concept album kind of like that.
Well, that's right. Basically what happened is when the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper, the whole record industry realized how much money they were losing by not selling albums, by having the focus on all singles. And so we had pretty much made our living up to that point off of singles. Roulette had never really been a big album selling label. I mean, it was kind of whatever wasn't the singles was going to be the album. That's basically the logic that they used. And so when Sgt. Pepper came on, that whole year, that was in September of 67, all of 1968 was this transition period. And from singles to albums. And when we left on the Humphrey campaign, all the big artists were singles acts. It was us and the Rascals and Gary Puckett and I could go on and on and on. All singles acts. When we got back 90 days later, it was all albums. It was Led Zeppelin, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Joe Cocker, Neil Young, all albums. And we realized that if we didn't start selling albums immediately, that our career could be over with Mony Mony and Do Something to Me. And so we were just very, very fortunate that we were working on Crimson and Clover at that very moment as another single. And I don't think there's any other record that we ever made, any other single, that would have allowed us to make the move from singles to albums, from AM to FM radio, in one shot, like Crimson and Clover did. It allowed us to make that jump immediately. And so we were, again, so fortunate to be right in the middle of the action. And then Crimson and Clover basically gave us the second half of our career, because then we started selling albums, and started with the Crimson and Clover album, and 2 singles by us, and a single. It was our first cover by another band of Sugar on Sunday, came from the Crimson and Clover album, and by the Click, and that went top 10. We had never had a top 10, one of our songs be top 10 by somebody else. It was really an amazing feeling. And so Crimson and Clover really logistically became probably the second most important record we had after Hanky Panky, our first hit. So yeah, it really opened up a whole new world for us. And then, of course, the next album was Cellophane Symphony, and Sweet Cherry Wine came from that. Crystal Blue Persuasion also came from the Crimson and Clover album. And that also was a big change for us. And so suddenly now that we're selling albums, we could sort of diversify, and we could release this kind of a single and then that kind of a single. And we weren't, it wasn't just, straight ahead pop rock. We got a chance to experiment with new things. So it opened up a whole new world for us.
And the other thing that's so interesting about that single is that that's not what was supposed to actually be released as the single. A radio station actually basically copied a preview you were playing for them, and by the time
that's right.
By the time you turned on the radio again, they were playing the song, right?
And not only the song, but the rough mix. I was, what happened was, Roulette was going to do a big, we had finished the record in 5.5 hours, literally from start to finish. And I did a rough mix, work tape that I could listen to, because the record was only about half done. So I mixed the thing with my elbows, basically. I just threw up the faders and made a work tape. And the next day we were in Chicago. And at that time, the biggest station in the country was WLS AM in Chicago. And WCFL, another 50,000 watt station, was going head to head with them. And Chicago was where all the action was at that moment. And so I took the record. We were doing a concert that night, and that afternoon I took the record up to WLS from my friend, the program director, John Rook, and I played it for him. And he says, "Tommy, that's a #1 record." He said, "That's a great record. Play it again." And he called over. He said, "Larry, come over." Larry Lujak was another DJ that was big at the time for LS. And he called him over. He says, "Listen to this." And while he's playing the tape for Larry Lujak, he's taping my tape.
Oh, my God.
And I didn't know it. And I go downstairs to the car. I get in the car, and it's on WLS, and I hear Channel 89 World Exclusive. Oh, and I'm going, oh my God, he's playing the work tape. Oh my God. I said, the record isn't done yet. We're only about half through. And so at any rate, I'm just going crazy because he's playing the thing every half hour. And meanwhile, we go back to Roulette the following day, and there's a death wreath from Jim Stagg, the program director of WCFL, the other big station in town, on the condolences on the death of Tommy James at WCFL radio. And the roulette's going nuts. Morris comes in. What the hell did you do? I said, I have no idea. I played the record. So meanwhile, we called up John Rook at LS and told him what he had done.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, you know what? Stag's going to have to play it because I'm playing it every 20 minutes. And don't you know, he broke the record. He broke the record all over the country, John Rook, with a work tape. It wasn't even a final mix. And I had to release the work tape as the single. To this day, the record Crimson and Clover, I never got a chance to mix or finish. And the song we know as Crimson and Clover was a rough 7.5 work tape, a rough mix. And it became the biggest record we ever had.
Exactly. It became one of your most iconic songs.
And it sold more than any other record.
I think if you asked anybody who was a fan of that song, nobody would have guessed that that wasn't the final mix.
It's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And when we put out the album, we had to make a long version from the short version rather than the other way around. And, you know, usually the people would make a long version and then cut it up for a short version for AM radio. In our case, we had to make a long version from the short version, and we had to make it sound just as lousy. You know, we had to basically copy the mix that of the work tape. So everything about that record was so ironic and mysterious. You know, it just out of nowhere became a hit.
And then after a couple more singles, like we talked about, a couple more albums, Tommy James and the Shondells disbanded, but you continued to find major success as a solo artist, especially with your 1971 hit Draggin the Line. But again, with this one, it's really interesting too, because this started out as a B-side to a record, right?
That's right. That's right. That had never happened to me before. You know, where I always prided myself in making singles that radio liked. Well, I put out Draggin the Line in '71 as the flip side to a song called Church Street Soul Revival. And, you know, it wasn't a bad record. I started making it up the charts. And then all of a sudden, radio all over the country started playing the flip side. That had never happened to me before. And I said, what are you people doing? And I said, well, we love the flip side, Draggin the Line. And so I went in and I remixed it and I put some horns on it that weren't on the original and re-released it as an A-side. And of course it went #1. And that was very ironic to say the least, but it just shows you the people know more than me.
It's crazy. I mean, because that bass line just makes it so iconic at the start of the song.
We actually, with that record, did the track before we wrote the song, and we wrote the song lyrically around that bass line. It just kind of, you know, it told you what it wanted to be, and Draggin the Line is sort of, from a syllable point of view, rhythmic point of view, what the bass line was doing. Boom, 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 Draggin the Line, you know. And so it was a wild record. It really was. And of course, we had 12 more chart singles, and I had a blowout finally with with Morris Levy.
Mm-hmm.
And there was in 71 and 72, there was a huge gang war that went on in New York City. The Gambinos were taking over all the families, all the rest of the families, and Morris was on the wrong side. He was with the Genovese people. And so the bottom line was that there was a whole lot of dead mobsters during that period of time. It was terrible. How many people? There was over 300 bodies they found of different families of guys all over town. My lawyer told me that it would be a real good idea if I left town till this thing blows over, because if they can't get Morris, they're going to get whatever makes Morris money. He says, that's you. And
That's got to be scary to hear.
oh God, it was awful. I was really very unnerved, very scared. And I went to Nashville. My lawyer, who told me this, represented Pete Drake and several of the Nashville producers. And I made an album with Pete Drake and Elvis's guys, Scotty Moore and DJ Fontana, and as well as other people. But we made an album called My Head, My Bed, My Red Guitar, and we released it on Roulette. But shortly after that, I really had a blowout with Morris, because Tommy Ebberly, who became, well, I'm going to just tell you, Vito Genovese, who was the head of the family, was in prison and died on Valentine's Day of 1969. And Tommy Ebberly, who was the next in command, was a regular at Roulette.
Oh, wow.
And Morris's business partner. And all these guys that were hanging out at Roulette like it was a social club. They loved the action, and we started recognizing people from the TV news that were coming, mobsters that were coming up to Roulette hanging out. And so when Tommy Ebberly became the head of the family, that's what happened. That was the meeting to do all that. Much of it happened at Roulette in Morris's office. And so the bottom line was that when this war happened, it was very scary to me. And finally, I came back to New York. In fact, the cover of the book, Me, the Mob, and the Music, was taken when I snuck back into New York. It was taken at the Persian Room at the Plaza Hotel, and I was given 13 or 14 gold records all at once. And I snuck back into town to do that. And then after the show, I went back to Nashville and it ended up being about a year that I spent in Nashville. And so when I came back, I was playing a gig at the Brooklyn Paramount Theater. And that night, Tommy Ebberly was murdered about 6 blocks from the theater that I played at.
Oh, wow.
And I went to Morris and I said, I thought this thing was over. I said, I'm leaving. I can't help it. I can't deal with this crazy crap anymore. I said, I'm out of here. He says, you ain't going anywhere.
Oh, wow.
And so we had this blowout, and I had to sort of intentionally make myself cold on Roulette. I didn't give him any more albums. He had several singles in the can that he released until he finally let me go in 74, early 75. And I ended up going with Fantasy Records out on the West Coast. I wanted to get as far away as I could. So I went with Fantasy, and we released a couple of albums. I came back to New York in 1979. And in 1980, I did a new album for Millennium RCA, and had another hit. I had a #1 adult contemporary record with Three Times in Love, which was, I had never had an adult contemporary hit before, and it went number 10, it went top 10 on the pop charts. So we were back, and we had 3 more chart records in the 80s. And then I started my own record company. And so, things, we've been touring all this time. This is my 60th year in this business. And it's amazing. We have, I have a show on Sirius XM radio every week on channel 73. I hope you'll let me get my plug in here.
Of course, go ahead.
I'm Sirius XM channel 73, 60s Gold. And I'm on every Sunday with our show Getting Together from 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So it's a big deal. This is our 9th year.
Oh, wow.
On Sirius. And when they first came to me and asked me to do it, I was a little scared. I was a little worried because I had never been a DJ before, and had never worked that side of the mic. But I love it. And I not only play the hits, but I can play a lot of my own music. And I said, "Can I go to jail for that?" He said, "No, play it. Play whatever you want." But I get to play records that I think should have been hits and weren't. There was so much music released in the 60s. I try to keep it in the 60s because it's called 60s Gold, but there was over 3,000 records released every week in the United States during the 60s, and only 5 made the national charts. So the competition was unbelievable. And some of the big records that didn't make it were by known artists. And so anyway, I get to play some of that stuff on my show. And then we have a movie coming out. We are, Me, the Mob, and the Music, our book is being turned into a film.
Oh, wow.
And so we're very lucky to have this happen at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And we were originally going to do a movie for theaters, but that's not how movies are made anymore. They're basically made for Netflix and HBO and stuff because, and they're made in episodes, but episodic serials, serial. And so Me, the Mob, and the Music is going to be about a 7 or 8 episode film where I think you get to tell the story better. I think you can develop the characters better. And also, I think more people are going to see it than would ever go to a theater.
Yeah.
So that's all coming up now in the next year, over the next 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's coming up pretty soon. We could expect to see that pretty soon.
Right.
One other thing I wanted to ask you was, first of all, the 60s Gold channel, I definitely recommend it. I have Sirius XM in my car, and I love listening to that channel, and I listen to your show sometimes, and it's great.
I think it's fun to listen to.
Yeah, no, and there's some great music that, because I'm into, 60s and 70s and 80s music, and it's great to hear some of those songs that you might have forgotten, or you might have never even heard it.
Yeah.
They deserve their play, for sure. One other thing I want to ask you about was in 1987, something really special happened to you when both Billy Idol and Tiffany independently turned 2 of your songs into #1 hits. Billy Idol did his live version of Mony Mony, and then Tiffany did I Think We're Alone Now. And neither of them realized, I don't think, that they were doing, the other person was doing Tommy James songs.
That's right.
But
and
they both fought for #1.
Right. They went up the charts like they were holding hands. And they both went #1 back to back, which was even stranger. It's such a wild thing to happen. And of course, over the years, we've had over 300 cover versions of our songs from people, totally different artists, from Dolly Parton on one hand doing Crimson and Clover, and Prince doing Crimson and Clover. Both of them, they couldn't be any different, and yet they both did Crimson and Clover, and of course Joan Jett then also did Crimson and Clover, had a #1 record with it.
Yeah, of course.
And
you've gotten to play that with her a couple times, I think.
That's right. That's right. But we've had over 300 cover versions of our songs done by REM. Did a beautiful job on Draggin the Line from the Austin Powers movie. And there's just been so many great artists. And I'm so honored and flattered when another artist does one of our songs. And I also am really intrigued at how another artist interprets our music. It's really fun. And we've had over 200 movies with our songs. Sony represents us in movies and television and commercials, and has done such a great job for us of getting movies over the years. So it's really been wonderful, and I'm glad to still be doing this after 60. It's amazing, really.
No, and I think what's really cool about that is with all these new covers and with, 60s music is kind of coming back to younger generations. You're doing shows 60 years later. You're having the people who are fans of you originally in the audience, but then they're bringing their kids and their grandkids, and maybe some of them are even bringing their great grandkids. What's it like to look into the crowd and see all these fans of all these different generations all wanting to hear you sing?
Well, it's almost a religious experience. It's really wild. It's joyfully wild because the music has stayed in front of the fans for all this time in one genre or another. And when we do the concerts, it just all kind of comes together at once. And so it's wild. And I really love performing. I feel really alive when I'm on stage. And I'm not nuts so much about traveling every week, but every week we're in a different place. And if you'd like to come and see our concert dates, it's on our website, just TommyJames.com. And, if we're on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and all over the place. So it's really, the internet, by the way, has really opened everything up. And all the gadgets, and there's so many ways to appreciate music nowadays that it's really a great experience. And I'm so glad to be doing this all this time.
Well, yeah, and I'm gonna put in the link of the bio for the interview where people can purchase your book, Me, the Mob, and the Music. It's an amazing book. And then I'm gonna put the SiriusXM link, and then also where people can find your tours.
Well, thank you.
I know you're coming nearby here. You're coming to, I believe, Waukegan, Illinois.
Waukegan, and we'll be in St. Charles.
St. Charles. Okay. A couple months after that, right?
Right.
At Arcata Theater. And that's a great theater as well. I definitely recommend going to see your show. You put on an amazing show.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. It was really an honor to get to hear your stories. We're looking forward to the movie coming out and everything else exciting.
Well, thanks for letting me ramble on. You asked all the right questions.
I'm glad. Thank you so much.
It was a great interview. God bless. Bye-bye.